My name is Nicholas Danforth, and I'm an editor at War on the Rocks. You are listening to the Warcast, the members-only podcast for what you need to know now. On Thursday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan met with Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, trying to make progress in what has not always been an easy relationship. Here to tell us how the meeting went is Dr. Ioannis Grigoriadis, an associate professor in Jean Monnet's Chair of European Studies at the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at Bilkent University in Ankara. Ioannis is also the Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Turkey Program at the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, LEMEP, where I've had the pleasure of working with him. Great to have you on the Warcast.
Great to be with you, Nick, and discuss an interesting event.
So the interesting side of this event actually started for those of us who were following it before the event itself. I could get into this. I'm more excited to hear your thoughts about this. Tell us what the expectations were going into this meeting, what a little bit of the backdrop on Greek-Turkish relations was before these two leaders met.
Well, it's important to state from the beginning that Greek-Turkish relations have been a very difficult period in the last 4 or 5 years. One of the reasons for this decline of the relationship was the bad personal relations between the two leaders. There have been attempts to build a strong personal relationship between the two, but this failed. And there were some very rare and unprecedented personal attacks, particularly by the Turkish president against the Greek prime minister. And many had anticipated that it would be impossible to repair this relationship. Nevertheless, since February, when these terrible earthquakes hit eastern and southeastern Turkey, there emerged a window of opportunity. The solidarity expressed by the Greek public opinion, the moves by the Greek government, paved the ground for a reconsideration of the relations. And of course, this was added to a general Turkish attempt to reduce the number of foreign policy fronts Turkey was having in the Middle East, in Southeastern Europe, and beyond. So there was some concerted effort to develop a common understanding on issues that were not so controversial politically, and the two sides could agree to disagree on the most important items of their agenda. But they also agreed to seek common interests and collaboration opportunities on a wide array of topics, because it is important here to state that given the fact that very few attempts have borne any fruit in the last years in Greek-Turkish relations, there is a lot of unrealized potential. So the leaders grabbed this opportunity, identified areas such as education, research, business, investment, but also migration and tourism, and tried to develop a set of common initiatives that would be a win-win opportunity for both countries.
Before I ask about some of the specifics on that, well, I put it this way. There had been, certainly on the Greek side, I know, some skepticism about the sincerity of Turkey's pivot towards rapprochement. On the eve of the meeting, as you said, there have been some very harsh words from Erdoğan towards Mitsotakis. There have been some very harsh words towards Greece in general, what I think pretty much everyone listening to it thought were pretty clear, if slightly tacit, Turkish threats to attack Greek islands. On the eve of the meeting, Erdoğan had a radically different interpretation of his own words. He tried to put a much more positive gloss on things. What did people in Greece make of that? What were the expectations from people in Greece going into this meeting about how real this rapprochement was?
Well, if you look into Greek media, I think the opinion is split. There are those who look into this as an opportunity, but also those who have sort of concerns about the sincerity of the whole initiative and whether it is possible that there will be a relapse of this aggressive rhetoric against Greece and the Greek prime minister. But what I would like to stress is that at ELIA-MEP, we've been running a number of opinion surveys with Istanbul Policy Center with the support of the Aneosis. What we found out there is that the Greek public opinion and the Turkish public opinion are by and large supporting diplomacy and dialogue as the means of resolving Greek-Turkish disputes, as well as the means to keep tension low when disagreement persists. So I think that's also very important to highlight that opening and maintaining channels of communication is not only useful for resolving disputes, but is also important for diffusing tensions that can morph into crisis. And I think this is a common understanding of the two sides that became clear yesterday.
And then what were the leaders themselves actually able to do to build on that or to facilitate that? Tell us more about the concrete steps that they took or at least discussed.
Well, there is an announcement that Greece acquired permission from the European Union in order to issue a special visa for Turkish citizens visiting 10 of the Eastern Aegean islands. Let me remind here that Greece is part of Schengen, so it's a part of the European Union. It doesn't have a sovereign policy on visa issues. It has to align its policy with the policies of Brussels. So it had to get a concession, a sort of a deviation from the normal procedures, which requires Turkish citizens to get a visa to visit the European Union and the Schengen zone. But now it will be possible for Turkish citizens to visit these 10 islands without applying for a visa in advance, but getting the visa on arrival and being able to stay in these islands for up to 7 days. So this is, of course, good news for the tourism of these islands, but it's also very good news for the exchange, communication, and developing of civil society bonds between Greeks and Turks. Let me highlight here that these bonds, especially on the Eastern Aegean, suffered a lot as a result of the crisis and the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, most, if not all, of the ferry connections were suspended. And this meant that people that used to trade, communicate, see each other for years could not. So now there is an interesting restart of this, and it sounds very promising. There is another very promising initiative that was announced about collaboration in fighting irregular migration. This is another issue whereby mistrust was prevalent on both sides. So bringing the authorities, the marine patrolling authorities of both sides closer is definitely going to build trust and deter the activities of smuggling networks.
One final question. Slightly further south in the Mediterranean, there's a war going on in Gaza. How is this factored into Greek politics, Greek-Turkish relations, if at all?
Well, what was interesting is that there were some statements by the two leaders, but what was interesting that both leaders tried to take a more moderate position compared to what they would normally express and state. Overall, there's an interesting shift of positions between Greece and Turkey compared to the last decades. Greece used to be much more pro-Palestinian, while Turkey used to be closer to Israel. But as a result of important developments in the last 10 to 15 years, we see that Greece aligns with Israel and appears to be closer to the Israeli position as it comes to addressing the Gaza situation. Of course, the Greek government will support the fact that the civilians need to be protected and there has to be some proportionality to the response of Israel. But overall, by and large, it is confirming the strategic dimension of the Greek-Israeli partnership as it developed over the last years. In the case of Turkey, you have an interesting situation. Why? Because Erdoğan was the leader that had distanced Turkey from Israel with this famous or infamous 1-minute statement in Davos, that heralded a sharp deterioration of Israeli-Turkey relations, with Turkey supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and kind of antagonizing Israel on many fronts, without, however, undermining a very lucrative trade relationship between the two sides, which is interesting and important to stress. So, in the framework of what we described before as attempt to reduce the number of open fronts, Erdogan met Netanyahu in September in New York, in the Turkevi, in this new skyscraper that Turkey had constructed in order to serve as cultural center. So, and there was an announcement about a visit of Netanyahu to Ankara and the restart of relations, energy, cooperation, and so on. However, the outbreak of the war in Gaza uh, signaled a dramatic shift. Turkey did not shift its position immediately in the first couple of days, but eventually took a very clear and adamant position in support of the Palestinians and Hamas, and combined with personal attacks against Netanyahu. So we have a very different position of Turkey compared to the Greek one in that respect. Having said that, the two leaders tried to bridge their positions and appeared keen on stressing that it is important and imperative to end the war and sort of prioritize, of course, the security of Israel as well as security of the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority as well.
Thank you very much for joining us in the Warcast.
You're most welcome, Nick. My pleasure.